Hello and welcome to the No Balls podcast. I'm your host, Patrick McDonald, with me co-host Finn McDonald. This is the start of the MLB offseason recap series. Today we are doing the American League Central. We will go every division. It won't be next week, but every division will get their own week where we give them an episode. Today we're starting with the Central. This was a very interesting division. A year ago, it kind of felt like all four of the competent teams were picking up a lot of wins from playing the Chicago White Sox 15 times a season. But at the end of the day, there were four teams that finished over 500 in this division, and this is a weak American League. I think it's very possible for a lot of teams in this division to make a run this upcoming season. We're going to start with Cleveland. Finn, do you have any notes that you want to have on this division in general before we get started with Cleveland?
Honestly, this division up for grabs. Anyone except for Chicago.
Yeah. This was the division we chose to do first because there's going to be a 2 week break after this, and we figured that this was the division that most of the teams had been. They've made their moves, is what we felt like, and good thing that we recorded on the day that we did because last night Jack Flaherty signed. We'll talk about that in the Detroit section. We're going to start with the Cleveland Indians. Oh, no longer the Cleveland Indians; they are the Cleveland Guardians. Um, if we just look at their current roster, they currently have roster an active payroll of $75 million. A year ago, I believe it was around the same figure. Finn, this is a low expense team that continually operates on a cheap budget. They even slashed some payroll this offseason, getting rid of Andres Jimenez, Josh Naylor, some of their more expensive arbitration players. I mean, if you look at it, it's Jose Ramirez and then, a 1 year deal for Bieber and Carlos Santana. And then it's like a couple arbitration guys, and then you just get the league minimum guys. And it's a really interesting roster build. Um, we're gonna get. Is there any huge notes that you want to have first before we get over or before we talk about what they did this offseason?
You know, I'd have to do the math for it, but I'm pretty sure that those three players you just named are like half of their budget, half their payroll, that budget.
Yeah, that is definitely a possibility. Cleveland, they're notoriously a pretty low spender. This year they have slashed it a ton. Quickly to go over their offseason moves. They in free agency they sign Paul Sewald um, to a major league contract, a 1 year deal. Carlos Santana, a 1 year deal for about $12 million. Shane Bieber, they signed to a 1+1 in favor of the player. He was recovering from Tommy John surgery that he suffered after 2 starts. And Alex Cobb, Matthew Boyd, those guys leave. James Karinchak was DFA'd. Connor Gillespie DFA'd. Pedro Avila was DFA'd as well. Miles Straw traded. Austin Hedges, they agree to an extension on. They non-tender George Valera. He ends up back on a minor league deal. And then they trade Miles Straw. They trade Andres Jimenez. They trade Nick Sandlin. They trade for Spencer Horwitz. They trade Eli Morgan. There's a lot of stuff going on here. Is there any big moves that you want to talk about specifically with that?
Probably not gonna afford to be able to pay Josh Naylor in the off season. I like the returns they got back. They got Slade Sagoni and a competitive draft pick that's practically your first rounder.
I mean, it's a very good move. Cleveland is commonly known to be the pitching whisperers, and well, they get a guy who they can at least whisper to a little bit with Slade Ciccone. I'm sure they can figure something out with him. If we just want to look at their depth charts now, um, going into the year, their projected lineup via Fangraphs is Stephen Kwan, Kyle Manzardo, Jose Ramirez, Carlos Santana, Lane Thomas, Will Brennan, Juan Brito, Josh Naylor, and Brian Rocchio. I mean, just looking at this team, right?
Wait,
I
I thought they traded Josh Naylor.
Bo Naylor. Did I say Josh Naylor?
Yes.
Yeah, Bo Naylor's their starting catcher. Um, yeah, so I mean, just talking about this, like looking at their team, they should have been a Hassan Kim team. I don't know why it was that they weren't at least involving their names in the Hassan Kim sweepstakes, but that's there. And then other weaknesses with this team. I mean, you look at the outfield, like Will Brennan and Lane Thomas are there. I mean, Joe Kenzie Noel will probably get some outfield time as well for them. They they just don't seem like a big lineup, but that's how they are every season, and they muster up decent offenses by the end of the year. So any significant notes on their lineup for context? Their bench is Austin Hedges, Gabriel Arias, and Daniel Sheenman.
Honestly, no notes.
Yeah, with this team, like it's almost like you look back a year ago, they had a Jimenez who was their everyday second baseman. Juan Brito, he's a guy who hit, for a good bit of power down in AAA last season, relative to his size and raw power ability. He hits for a lot of doubles. He walks a lot, doesn't strike out a ton. So Juan Brito's a solid player. He grades out fine with the glove. He's a rookie. You look at their other guys that they're expecting to fill spots. Lane Thomas was a trade deadline acquisition a year ago. Wasn't particularly great here, but he's here now. He's playing center field for them. I don't think that's a natural position for him. It is a natural position, but not one that comes easily to him as he's about to be 30 years old. I think that's something they can look to improve. And it's a little atypical from a Guardians team to have a guy too who's not necessarily a great defensive player. So how do you feel kind of about this team with how they're building things?
I definitely feel like they're trying to build younger right now. I mean, I'm pretty sure on the offensive side of things, Jose Ramirez is the oldest guy on the team, not named Carlos Santana.
Yeah, and Carlos Santana is a guy who is getting a lot of long-term commitment from them. Manzardo was honestly a really great pickup from them. They traded Aaron Savali for him a couple deadlines ago, and they got him from Tampa Bay. And Manzardo was a top 50-ish prospect around that time, and he can really swing it. Their top prospect, Chase DeLauder, is a guy who's would be a huge snub if he's not in somebody's top 100 prospects. He's a corner outfield first base type who has trouble. He's had trouble staying on the field, but when he's on the field, he can really swing it. I think he could easily debut for this team. It's just they have a ton of these corner infield, corner outfield type guys. If I had to guess, Delauder could potentially win the right field job out of opening day with Will Brennan expected to start there, but I would also expect Jokenski Noel to get a bulk of playing time. All right. To move forward to their pitching, currently Shane Bieber not in their rotation because he's going to start the year hurt more likely than not. Tanner Bybee, Ben Lively, Gavin Williams, Luis Ortiz, Tristan McKenzie is at the top of their rotation. Like I said, Shane Bieber's on the IL. If we look at their bullpen, or let's start about that rotation, Finn. How do we feel about this rotation with them? With Bybee, Lively, Gavin Williams, Luis Ortiz, and then Tristan McKenzie. How do we feel about it?
I like the depth, but I feel like it lacks a true one.
Yeah, it's 100% absent of an ace is what I feel about this Cleveland team, but that's how they were a year ago, and they managed 93 wins and a division win, and I still like a lot of the guys here. Like Gavin Williams isn't an ace, but there is some upside to him. There is a lot of prospect hype around him potentially being an ace. I think that's pretty interesting. And then you look at Tanner Bybee, who's just only taken steps forward since being a first or a fifth round draft pick 3 years ago. He's now striking out 9.5 batters per nine in the major leagues. Cleveland's really good at developing pitching, and I think specifically with a guy like Luis Ortiz, where like, you know, guy's 26 years old, had a 4.3 in Pittsburgh a year ago through 150 innings. Like, specifically, Cleveland's really good at developing stuff and velocity. And Ortiz has been a pitchability guy. Like, they could tap into something with Luis Ortiz, and I could see something happening with this rotation. And then you add Shane Bieber in there, I start to like it a lot more. So I think this is a huge strength of this Guardians team.
I definitely think it's now or never for Ortiz. I mean, if Cleveland can't get him developed, I don't know if they're easy to develop.
Yeah, but I mean, he's a guy who's league minimum for 2 more seasons, which I'm sure they loved because they got to keep the cost of acquisition extremely low. Um, Tristan McKenzie, first year arbitration. I think if Shane Bieber was healthy, I mean, there's a potential like he might get DFA'd if he has the season he had a year ago and Shane Bieber's healthy. Like that's how it could be. And then Cleveland, if you just look at their bullpen is filled with arms. All right, we'll get to their bullpen. Emmanuel Clase, Cade Smith, Hunter Gaddis, Paul Sewald, Tim Herron, Andrew Walters, Eric Sabarowski, Slade Ciccone. That's their projected bullpen via Fangraphs. Cade Smith had an excellent season a year ago as a rookie who was in the crazy 2020 draft. He was a non-drafted guy. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we feel very similarly about this bullpen, even with some losses of Eli Morgan and the guy they sent to Toronto, who's slipping my mind right now. I mean, this is a very strong bullpen, and I'm sure you have the same sentiments.
Oh, Nick Sandlin.
Nick Sandlin, there you go. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we're just beating a dead horse here, but how do you feel about this bullpen?
Good bullpen. The only thing that I kind of dislike is the length there of a notable lefty.
Yeah, I mean, Tim Herron is a guy like you wouldn't really think of him as a great left-handed option, but I mean, he got some good results a year ago. And then Eric Sabarowski, he's somebody. Notably, he was a minor league Rule 5 pick, which very few of those guys end up making the major leagues eventually, but that's a very fun thing about him. And then, yeah, I do really like um, what they have here in this bullpen. I think with Cade Smith and Clase, like regardless of what the other one did the night before, like the ninth inning secured with having those two guys there. Other notable guys, David Fry got Tommy John surgery. Previously, he was kind of their DH anyway, and the Guardians have said that he's not going to play the field. So it'll be him DHing once he returns. I'm sure it won't be at the very start of the season, but he was one of their more interesting hitters a year ago. So I think that's a big loss for them to start the year. I guess we'll just talk about guys on um, the borderline too for debuting in the majors. First round or first overall pick from a season ago, Travis Bazzana. He's consensusly like a top 25 prospect at this point. I don't think he'll be up right away. I think they're going to obviously give Brito and Rocchio their chances in the big leagues. And they'll go from there. And I do like that idea to do that with Travis Bazzana or with those guys to make way for Travis Bazzana later in his development. Other notable guys, Angel Martinez, he's a super utility man. He's a AAA, bound to make a major league debut. Not a debut, but to get significant major league playing time. And then They have Jonathan Rodriguez and Tyler Freeman who are on the 40 man, but they're not super significant players. And then Chase DeLauder, like I mentioned, very very high ranked prospect for them. And then some of their other guys, Jason Churio is not their number one prospect, but he's definitely their number two prospect or three behind DeLauder and Travis Bazana, switch hitting potential center fielders, Jason Churio. So, we look at their lineup right now when you see Lane Thomas. We maybe don't need a long term solution there. We just need a stopgap until Jason Churio. Jake Fox, 22-year-old infielder in AA. Interesting guy to know, good prospect for them. And then just they have a bunch of guys. Ryan Webb, I think, could have been an interesting Rule 5 pick for teams this year. He didn't get Rule 5. I thought he would have been a guy who could have been. Daniel Espino, we're not sure what to make of him. He's just been hurt since he got super high prospect type. Joey Cantillo, Logan Allen are other guys who could potentially make up some type of major league pitching staff. Overall, how do we think we grade this offseason?
I'd grade it a C.
Yeah, I think I also graded a C, and reason is I don't necessarily see the avenue in which they got better here. I love the ability to get off the Miles Straw contracts and the Andres Jimenez contracts, and then free up some money, not keeping Josh Naylor. I think those are good, baseball operations processes, but more so in the case of Naylor and Andres Jimenez, I'm not sure that you 100% guaranteed that you've replaced the production there. And then in the case of Miles Straw, uh, it was Miles Straw. It didn't really matter. But getting off of all of that money is very significant for them. It's just, I don't necessarily know that they have done enough for me to say that having all that extra money has provided them a really good offseason. I do like their system. I think they can have a pretty solid team, but we'll ultimately see. I think this still could be a really good Guardians team this following year because they were pretty good last year and they didn't have Shane Bieber all year last year. And I think he does change a lot for them. Next team up, we'll take a break.
Yes, I still think they will be good, but I just don't think I can give you any higher of a grade than a C if I don't see where you're getting there.
Yeah, I agree. I think you really need to they did do a lot of things well. It's just I don't think that they've necessarily gotten better this offseason. I was gonna do two separate grades. Do we think they did a good job this offseason to set them up for now and the future, the long-term future? And then what do we grade, or do we think they got better? That's what we would do in the NBA shows. Do we think they got better for this upcoming season? You and I both answered probably no. But do I think that they have made this operation a better and something that will operate a lot more smoothly in the future? I think probably yes. And that's what separates the Guardians from some of the other teams that we'll get to throughout the series and potentially in this episode that even when they're not getting better, they're setting themselves up in the future. Do you have anything else on Cleveland?
I don't.
All right. So we're talking about Cleveland and how they have been a team that sets themselves up even when they're not getting better. They set themselves up really well to get better in the future. I think the Royals are a team that hadn't previously done that. And with a new regime change, almost completely reworked everything in their organization a year or two ago. I think they've become a lot better at setting themselves up for the future. I think their pitching development is actually pretty damn good now. It probably rivals the Guardians for the best in this division in general. I think overall this is a pretty good pitching development division, but I think the Royals have done a really good job. As a small market team, they have really operated really cleanly. So looking at the Royals, they currently are running a budget of $204 million. This is a nice, bump up from the past couple of years. I think they're spending a little bit. If you look at some of the guys they're spending on, Sal Perez, that was an extension from the previous regime, but I'm sure that this current one would have done something kind of similar. Michael Wacha, a guy they returned. Seth Lugo, a free agent that they take a chance on. Bobby Witt Jr., they signed to just a big extension, but it looks like a really good one. Hunter Renfroe was a $15 million free agent a year ago that they signed. Royals typically would never just do that as a minor move for them, and then they make a move this offseason to acquire Jonathan India. This is a team that's starting to spend a little bit more money, and I think as the team continually will be better and better, I think this is a team that's going to continue to spend money with this new ownership group and this new management group. So Kansas City to start. We'll go over their transactions that they have done this offseason. Similarly to Detroit, they just made a move. They signed Carlos Estevez to a 2-year, $22 million extension. Not extension, free agency contract. 1-year contract for Michael Lorenzen for this upcoming season, a 3-year deal with Michael Wacha, like I briefly alluded to before. It is a 18 million, 18 million, 14 million. No mathematician, but that to me sounds like $50 million. Three that I just read that one. And then guys they lose to free agency: Yuli Gurriel, Tommy Pham, Will Smith, Robbie Grossman, Garrett Hampson, Paul DeYoung, um, Josh Taylor, the DFA. Um, Trade wise, they acquire Joey Weimer and Jonathan India from Cincinnati. In return, they sent out Brady Singer. We've graded that trade in one of our offseason videos. I don't know which one to point you guys to. That is the moves that they have made this offseason. What would you say about this offseason for Kansas City, Finn? What do you think?
They definitely did some stuff that they needed to get done. I like that trade you just mentioned, and I like that they brought Waka back.
100%. We'll just go ahead and start with the pitching on the depth chart with them because I think that's a key area for them. The reason I have praise for this current organization: Cole Reagan, Seth Lugo, Michael Wacha, Michael Lorenzen, Chris Bubich, Alec Marsh. You see, if you add in Brady Singer here, there was somewhat of an excess here, and I think previous regimes would have said, "Hey, just let Wacha leave in free agency," which the guy had a 4 WAR a season ago, I believe. B or F WAR, one of them was around 4. But no, they signed that guy to an extension. They trade Brady Singer to upgrade the lineup. I think that, along with the moves that they made for Hunter Harvey and Lucas Ursag a year ago, are just things that I wouldn't have previously expected out of a small market team like Kansas City. And then you add on the signing of Carlos Estevez, and like this is a team that's suddenly operating like they got some cash in their pocket. And they're still towards the bottom of the league in spending, but everything that they're doing trend wise is pointing significantly up to where I don't think that's the end of this. Like I just mentioned, the rotation: Reagans, Lugo, Waka, Lorenzen, Bubich, Alec Marsh is projected to be the 6th guy. I'm not sure if it's confirmed that they're going to have a 6-man rotation, but those are the 6 guys in the mix for rotation spots. What do you have to say about that rotation?
Honestly, great depth, great top. Nothing really much to hate.
Specifically, like in this division, is there a stronger 1 through 3 with Lugo, Reagans, and Waka? I mean, you can argue that there is, but I mean that is a really strong 1 through 3. I think all 3 of them. I mean, a year ago, I believe all 3 of them got Cy Young votes, and I would expect at least Cole Reagans to get some Cy Young votes in the next season. Um, I mean, it's gonna be a pretty solid pitching staff. Um, Buoyed by that really strong top 3. Lorenzen, we'll see what happens with him and Bubich and Marsh to fill out the depth. I think you could argue that you would want a more solidified arm in there, but I think taking a chance on Bubich moving to rotation or Marsh finally getting some innings is worth the risk there. We'll talk about the bullpen now. Chris Stratton, Sam Long, Angel Zerpa projected to be some of the lower leverage guys. Zerpa and Long are lefties. Uh, John Schreiber, Hunter Harvey, Lucas Urseg, and Carlos Estevez expected to be at the back of the bullpen. How do we feel about this bullpen, Vince? I mean, well, typically with a lot of teams, we're talking about the back of the bullpen because those are the guys who are going to be there at the end of the year unless they get traded for prospects. How do we feel about this bullpen, Finn?
Honestly, I like the move to bring in Estevez. I think it was necessary.
I
Now,
agree.
especially because of the guys that they had in close to postseason games coming out of that pen.
Yeah.
And
And like even looking at it this way, like Chris Bubich was a guy who was not previously starting a ton of games. They're draining from this bullpen a little bit already with that. And then I feel like adding Estevez, who's another guy with some closing experience, is a really like valuable thing to have on this team. You have Hunter Harvey, who's gotten closing experience with the Nationals previously, and then Lucas Urseg. He's almost 30 years old, but he just finished his first full season in the big leagues a year ago because he was a converted position player. Um, I think just the ability to add Estevez into the bullpen and now it moves everybody back a tick is very important. I think Ursak might still be the closer, but Estevez could also fill in if they need him to in that spot. And I think adding a guy who has leverage experience is big for them. So yeah, so we look at their lineup now. Uh, Projected from Fangraphs is India or Jonathan India, projected at DH. Then Bobby Witt, Vinny Pasquantino, Salvador Perez, Michael Massey, Hunter Renfroe, MJ Melendez, Michael Garcia, Kyle Isbell. With the bench, they have Nick Lofton, Freddie Fermin, Darion Blanco, and Nelson Velasquez. For me, when I look at this lineup, I like a lot of it, and then I also dislike a lot of it. I'm interested in what you have to say on it, Finn. I'll let you go first.
honestly, I would have liked to have seen the Royals go out and get a bat, specifically an outfielder.
100%. You look at their outfielders. I mean, Isbell's a glove out there in center field. That makes sense to me. Hunter Renfroe and Melendez, I believe both had negative WARs a year ago, and I believe Hunter Renfroe was like towards the bottom. Now, of course, Hunter Renfroe has a really great track record. Besides that, and Melendez, had some prospect pedigree prior to that. But I mean, bringing in a quarter outfielder here that can hit for you is pretty big. I think with them, it's an interesting note that they kind of also need corner outfielders to be defenders as well because of how big Kauffman Stadium is. So it is a more interesting fit. I think I projected them Anthony Santander in our initial predictions video. Maybe that's not a great fit for them. Um, so we'll see. I do think they're short of that, and they're probably not done. They can probably add another guy who, there's not a ton of great options available in free agency, but they can get somebody in there to fill out a lot of other spots for them. So I agree with you. Outfield's a little weak. I really like the infield though, like Massey, India, Pasquantino, uh, Michael Garcia. For what it's worth, like he could be something. And then Nick Lofton's a guy who like used to be an interesting prospect. He just hasn't gotten a ton of time. I think he could get some core outfield reps sneakily. And then Freddie Fermin a year ago had a pretty solid season. So Salvador Perez isn't going to take up a ton of catching reps. Like I'm sure he's still going to DH quite often. And I think it's going to keep their lineup pretty refreshing, having two guys who catch who also hit the ball pretty well with Fermin and Salvador Perez. So I think that's a strength of this team. I guess one other thing, this could be a team that steals a lot of bases. Obviously, there's Bobby Witt, Michael Garcia. I don't know how many bases he stole a year ago, but it was a good bit. Kyle Isbell is a pretty athletic guy. Melendez is a crazy athlete. I think they're going to be a base stealing team. Just to look over some minor league depth for them on guys who are up and coming. Carter Jensen is a really interesting prospect for them. Of course, he's a catcher. He's in Double A currently. The glove has really come along with him. He was a guy who kind of hit his way previously, when the gloves come along with him. Great eye at the plate. Interesting guy. Blake Mitchell, another one of their top prospects, first rounder a couple years ago. He's a switch hitting catcher and A plus. Um, Nick Prado, a guy who just really hasn't panned out. He's still on the 40-man roster. Jack Caglio, and I believe is their top prospect. First baseman, no longer pitching like he did in college. It was in Double A year ago. Javier Vaz, a guy they acquired. No, did not acquire. A guy they drafted a year ago. Him and Kevin Biggio are expected to be AAA infielders who could definitely make an impact on the major league roster. Could play a lot of different spots, both hit left-handed. So one of those guys probably going to have a chance to be up in the majors pretty soon. Right-handed infielders, Jordan Groshans is in their organization in AAA, could eventually become something. And outfielders, Tyler Gentry has made a major league debut before. Joey Wiemer, Drew Waters, Gavin Cross, who was a top prospect for them for a while. He's now 24 years old, yet to make a major league debut. He's all the way up to AAA. And then on the pitching side of things, Chandler Champlain, interesting pitcher to have, acquired from the Yankees. In which trade was that? I actually can't remember off the top of my head. But he could be something for them. And on the relief side of things, Carlos Hernandez was the guy who they DFA'd in arbitration, but they settled on a minor league deal. Kind of a really fun guy who he hasn't, things haven't worked out for him. Yeah, that's the Kansas City Royals. So, Finn, do you have any final Royals comments that you want to get out here before we transition to the Detroit Tigers?
No, but let's grade them right quick.
Oh, you're 100% right. All right. How do we feel do we think they got better between do we think they got better this offseason?
I do.
Okay. I do as well. Do we think that what would we give them a letter grade wise and considering how they got better and setting themselves up long term?
I'd go a B minus.
I think I'm gonna go a B with them. Primarily because there wasn't too much that they did. A lot of it was returning Waka, um, which I think was a great move, and like returning Michael Lorenzen, I think is a great move, right? But I do think that there's these holes in the corner outfield, and there's not necessarily an answer, um, really anywhere on their roster. Um, Even in the minor leagues, like they don't have a ton of great outfield prospects. So I think that's a potential concern for them. But I do think that they are a better team, and they did position themselves pretty well to get better moving forward. I would give them a B plus. So with that being said, we'll take a break here and we will transition to the Detroit Tigers. All right, so now we're talking about the Tigers, Finn. This was a team that made a run to the playoffs, very improbable a year ago. They won a playoff series against the Houston Astros against both of our pickings. I remember the Andy Ibanez RBI double that made me have to make a comment in our comment section apologizing because before I had said a snarky remark about Andy Ibanez. Not really out of spite of him, just saying that the Tigers didn't have a very good lineup. Of course, they lose in the second round of the playoffs. Whatever. They're did way more than we expected them to, especially after the deadline moves that they made. That honestly were pretty good. Tyrone Lorenzen is a very good prospect, and they got him for Jack Flaherty along with Trey Sweeney. So briefly, just to say that before we get started, just to review their offseason. All right. So To start, they made a good bit of free agent moves recently, actually, too. Tommy Canley, they signed to a 1 year contract to be a reliever for them. Jack Flaherty, they signed to a 2 year deal. While you're waiting, can you pull up the numbers on that one? Because I'm not actually 100% sure what they are. 1 year deal for Gleyber Torres, about $15 million. Um, Minor league deals. Alex Cobb, a 1 year, $15 million free agent contract. And then a bunch of minor league deals. Non-tender reliever Wilmer Flores, Brennan White, Eddie's Leonard, Ricky Venasquio. And they all get minor league deals, I believe, as well. Minor league deal for Thomas Nido. Interesting for them. That's fun. Trade wise, they actually just made a trade with the Tampa Bay Rays. That's been their only move so far. Um, they get Anderson Delgado, who wasn't a huge prospect, and they trade Alex Faedo, who wasn't a big piece for the Detroit Tigers. So, did you pull up the Flaherty stuff in?
The Flaherty numbers, yes.
Okay.
It was 35 over 2, and there is an opt out after the first year.
So the common Boris contract, I don't think Flaherty's even a Boris client. I'm just saying that. Because when is Pete Alonso going to sign Scott Boras? I don't know. Um, yeah, so that's the Tigers. Do you have anything that you want to say on any of these moves? Because I think they made some pretty interesting ones, to say the least.
Honestly, I'm glad they got Flaherty because this entire offseason, I've been hounding them. Get pitching because they had absolutely no pitching depth.
I think Flaherty's a really fun one too because he just had a great half season with them, and I think a lot of teams were concerned about the inconsistent velocity with him because there were times in the playoffs where it was like 86, just randomly. Not 86, but it would get to like 89, and you're like, what the hell is Jack Flaherty even? And, you know, when it was going well in the summer, it was, 92, 93, and that's very good. So I think returning Flaherty is very fun for them. I think it's a place where he could potentially even extend longer than this season if things go well for him. So uh, I like the move adding Flaherty. We haven't talked about that one. That certainly would have been a move we would have talked about if it had happened in a grading episode. Um, so to go to their depth charts, first we'll go over the lineup. Projected lineup via Fangraphs: Parker Meadows, Gleyber Torres, Riley Green, Kerry Carpenter, Matt Vierling, Colt Keith, Jace Young, Jake Rogers, and Trey Sweeney is their projected starting lineup. Uh, Projected bench for them: Dylan Dingler, Javier Baez, Andy Ibanez, Zach McKinstry. I think one note I want to say before: holy lefties. What is that? 6 lefties projected in their starting lineup. Crazy stuff. I'll let you get the start, Finn. What else do you notice with this lineup?
That they're paying Javier Baez a ton of money not to be in it.
100%. And I think that plays a little bit, him not being there plays a little bit off of, he's going to play against lefties quite frequently for Jace Jung, Trey Sweeney, Colt Keith potentially as well. Uh, I think it's just a really weird team build because you don't the great offensive players don't jump out at you, but then you're like, oh, Kerry Carpenter, barely faced left-handed pitching a year ago, but when he faced right-handed pitching, it was awesome. Riley Green took a significant step forward, but for a casual fan, like his batting average dropped 30 points. And then Parker Meadows a year ago, I don't think people realize how, like, Parker Meadows was pretty damn solid a year ago as a glove first center fielder bat wise. Gleyber Torres, Yankee fans will tell you he fucking sucks, but people who are intelligent will tell you, hey, he's an above average hitter as a second baseman. That's pretty valuable. And then Trey Sweeney, we like Trey Sweeney hitting at the bottom of a lineup. I think he's a fun player to have. What other lineup notes do you have on them, Finn?
Honestly, would have liked to have seen a outfield signing, particularly left.
Okay, yeah. And then, or right field and displacing Bueling to be a utility player versus an everyday player.
Yep.
Yeah. Because currently they're projecting Riley Green to move back to left field. I think that's what I had on my player rankings. So hopefully I don't sound like an idiot. Um, but yeah, I think something else could be fun there because if you just look like Cole Keith, Jace Young, Trace Sweeney, Parker Meadows, like I like all of these players. It's just they haven't yet done it in the major leagues at a like consistently. So we'll see with them, but uh, I hope so. And then Jake Rogers is a great defensive guy, and I think you know as a guy who definitely got no top 100 consideration for me, Jake Rogers is the top half of the league catcher. And then Dylan Dingler, again, adding on to those guys who haven't proven anything, like guy can pick it back there defensively. He could throw well. I'm not sure where the bat is with him, but that could be something. And Andy Ibanez got decent results as a hitter a year ago. Is close to league average, and I think Zach McKinstry, like this is the Detroit Zach McKinstrys. Like every player that they have is Zach McKinstry. Um, so I think that's just notes with their lineups. Do we think this is a good lineup? Do we think it's going to improve from a year ago? I think it has to be internally, and it has to be with Kerry Carpenter hitting against left-handed pitching, because I don't know if y'all realized, but he had an excellent season, at least like a 150 WRC plus against righties. Why is he not faced? I think he had 30 plate appearances against lefties a year ago. Like, I think we need to at least give him a shot. Um,
Honestly, yeah, I agree with you on the internal. Oh, and Glaber's gonna have to act like an above average hitting second baseman.
I mean, he was a year ago. So if he repeats that, then that's great for them. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think that this is certainly you can put out way more embarrassing lineups than this, and honestly, there's a ton of upside with this. Like if a couple of these guys click, right? Like Keith, Chase Young, Trey Sweeney, Parker Meadows. I mean, one of them is going to click, and then if you get multiple to click, like this suddenly looks really good. So I really do kind of like the position of their lineup. We'll go to the rotation now. A year ago, down the stretch, there were two starting pitchers for Detroit. Okay, it was Tarek Skubal and Reese Olson. Those are the two guys actually pitching in the starting rotation. Then it was figure everything else out after. I think this year there's some resemblance of a starting rotation. Tarek Skubal, Jack Flaherty, Reese Olson, Alex Cobb, Casey Mize is their projected rotation. How do we feel about it, Finn?
I really like that top three.
Yeah, honestly, if you get a healthy Alex Cobb, I really like that top four. However, Alex Cobb has had some health concerns past couple of years, so I understand not being 100% bought in, but I like that top four, right? If Alex Cobb is healthy, I like it. Mize, you figure it out. They have a ton of pitching prospects that they can give shots to. Um, quickly, I guess we just have to shout him out. Jackson Jobe, as like an amateur prospect evaluator, then I think he's probably a better pitching prospect than Roki. Finn. I don't know. I feel like Roki is a very good player, but Jackson Jobe is excellent. Bubba Chandler is excellent. That's just my gripe on Roki consistently being the top prospect in baseball. Because I don't really know, like Jobe and Bubba Chandler are awesome. I think this is me rambling a little bit too much, but Jackson Jobe's awesome. He's going to start games for this Detroit Tigers team. Consensus top 10 prospect as a starting pitcher. Um, talking about their bullpen real quick. Kenta Maeda's there mainly because he's due a ton of money. They don't want to DFA him. You might as well keep him and see if something clicks at age 37. Brant Herter, lefty. Austin Gunther, lefty. Um, and then Tyler Holton, who had a pretty good year a year ago, another lefty in this bullpen. I like the depth of lefties here. Brent Herter's a guy who has started games throughout his minor league career. I really like just the ability to have all of these left-handed guys here. And then the rest of the bullpen, Jason Foley, Bo Brisky, Tommy Canley, and Will Vest. What do we think about this bullpen, Finn?
It will be interesting to see who steps up to the plate as the closer. It's
Yeah,
nothing
so
shouting off the paper at me.
I mean, I would assume it's Jason Foley. He closed games for them a year ago. Um, I didn't know he was a non-drafted free agent. Shout out Jason Foley. But that's who I would assume is going to take the closing reps. I mean, Finn, why wasn't this a team that at least took a chance on Ryan Presley? Like, you know what I mean? Like they could have taken a chance on Ryan Presley. I think they are devoid of a consistent ace, not an ace, but an ace bullpen arm. But like, I do like the depth of this bullpen. If you ask me, am I confident in Tommy Canley throwing a good inning? Somewhat, yeah. Holton, Brisky, and Foley, I really like towards the back end of a bullpen. I think they're just missing a guy who I'm very confident throwing the ninth inning of every ball game with a lead. Uh, but I still really like this bullpen. Do you have any other things on this bullpen before we get this one done?
I don't.
Just to talk about the depth charts, the depth that they have. Um, at the catching position, Thomas Nito, you know, utility catcher for his career. Tyrone Alonso in Double A, who is a catcher who absolutely crushes the ball. He's a switch hitter. I would be very interested in how far Tyrone Alonso is going to go here. Like he could be an awesome player. Spencer Torkelson's a guy who's kind of been pushed out for them. A season ago, he hit 30 homers. Like there's some stuff there with Spencer Torkelson. I don't know if they're going to tap back into it. I would hope they do. Um, Ryan Kreidler, Eddie Leonard, utility infielders. Kreidler, a guy who he could play a major league shortstop if things go wrong with Trey Sweeney. Um, it's a guy to look out for. Justin Henry Malloy, Wensil Perez, guys who can really swing it. I would look out for some of those guys to potentially make a difference. Akil Baddoo, guy who just kind of has been pushed out. Don't take your eye off of him. Kryler Montero has made some big league appearances. Matt Manning has made some big league appearances. Ty Madden made his big major league debut a year ago after a really rough season in AAA. I've already mentioned Jackson Jobe. Obviously, you should know Jackson Jobe. Bullpen wise, Alex Lang is a guy who has really fallen out of grace past couple years. Wilmer Flores, they sent to the AFL. He used to be an interesting prospect. He's currently a minor league not a minor league free agent, but was a minor league free agent signing who they designated for assignment. That being said, Finn, I'm going to let you talk for a second. What would you grade this offseason? Do you think they got better? Answer those two questions for me.
I would grade it a B, and yes, I think they got better.
Yeah, so for me, like, they definitely get better, right? They add Gleyber Torres into this lineup. They don't really lose anything. They add Alex Cobb and Jack Flaherty to this lineup. They don't really lose anything. I think it's going to be very hard for this team to be worse than the team was a year ago because if you just look at the team a year ago, like, they couldn't hit worth a damn last year. So, I mean, this is a team that 100% I would say got better. And then you add Jack Flaherty into this rotation. You add Alex Cobb into this rotation. the potential to add Jackson Jobe, who I think could potentially be the best pitching prospect in baseball. Like, there's no way this team is necessarily worse on paper than it was a year ago. Even if we don't think they'll come by, we're 100% stamping them to come by the 83 wins again. And I would say that this is a B plus offseason, similarly to the Royals, because they did get better. But I mean, I think similarly to you, I would assume that they didn't really do anything ambitious that just makes you have to say that they got a ton better. Is that kind of the sentiment you have on them?
Honestly, just very short term. I don't think they were that ambitious this offseason.
100%. I think it was a ton of safe moves that do 100% make the team better. It doesn't handicap them long term, but I also don't necessarily think it makes them like 100% going to incrementally get better. Yeah, you know what I mean? It doesn't set them up 100% better for the future. It just makes them a better in the current moment and doesn't handicap them going forward. All right, so now we're dealing with the Minnesota Twins. They finished last year 82-80. They did the Twins' signature move, which was fall out of the playoffs in the last 2 weeks of the season. Very unfortunate for Twins fans. I'm sorry that you'll have to deal with that every year. They've done very little. They have currently no what's it called? uh, major media rights deal. There we go. Um, so they're currently up for sale, ownership wise. Not up for sale, but ownership would now listen to offers for the team, which they would have never done before. Like they've never done that before. So basically, like this is the most that Minnesota's. This is the most uncertain Minnesota's future has been for a while now, and because of that, they have done very little. They've added a couple guys on minor league contracts. They haven't added a single major league free agent. They lost Anthony Descalfani, Carlos Santana, Caleb Thibault, and Max Kepler. On the trades aspect, they have acquired Diego Cartaya, who had been DFA'd by the Dodgers, which I think is actually an interesting move. They traded Giovanni Moran for Mickey Gasper, who is a catcher slash infielder. Giovanni Moran was a reliever, and they sent him to the Red Sox. So I mean, I do want to say too. I think the Cartaya pickup is actually like kind of an interesting thing for them. Like it's a guy who a couple years ago was, a very highly touted prospect, and they got him for not really anything. So I think it's a good buy low type of move. We'll start by looking through their lineup. Projected at DH is Willie Castro, Carlos Correa, Trevor Larnach in left field, Byron Buxton, Matt Wallner in right field, Royce Lewis, Jose Miranda at first, Brooks Lee at second, Ryan Jeffers is how they round up their lineup. Finn, what do we think of this lineup? What do you think?
Honestly, I don't hate it. There are some places I'd like to see get improved, like right field.
I mean, like Matt Wallner's a good player. He can hit the ball a good bit. Defensively, I don't like their corner outfield, but it is what it is at that point. And then if Buxton's missing games and Willie Castro's filling out in center field, I really don't like their outfield defensively, but I do think they can swing it with Wallner and Larnach. Like those guys can swing the bat. Um, so I think that's fun. I think like it it certainly is a good lineup in my opinion.
Honestly, with Wallner, I don't see him as an outfielder. I see him more of somebody that plays first base or DHs versus one side of the plate.
Yeah, I mean I agree with you. I think there are some deficiencies defensively, and I think the big thing to point out too is a lot of the injury stuff. Like, I don't know what happens with team doctors in Minnesota, but I mean, Brooks Lee, Royce Lewis, Byron Buxton, Carlos Correa, these are guys who have been just killed by injuries, especially over the last couple years. Like, I literally included a spot on my top 100 list that was Byron Buxton / Royce Lewis. Like, one of them will be healthy, the other one won't be. So I like that's just goes to show you like how uncertain a lot of the injury stuff is with some of these guys. Um, their bench: Christian Vasquez, Eduardo Julian, Michael Hellman, and then Austin Martin projected from Fangraphs. Um, it's a bench. It rounds out stuff. I think Eduardo Julian could be a guy who potentially gets a little bit more appearances this year than he did last year. Specifically, he could fill in at second base when Royce Lewis and Brooks Lee are hurt, or get some right-handed matchups for Jose Miranda, just stuff like that. All right. We will now get their rotation. The rotation is Pablo Lopez, Joe Ryan, Bailey Ober, Simeon Woods Richardson, and Chris Paddock. What's the litmus on this rotation, Finn?
Honestly, another one where I really like the top three. Just like the depth in general.
Yeah, I mean, I would say Pablo Lopez is pretty solid. He's coming off of a down season where he had a 4.3, but that's still pretty solid. And I kind of like Joe Ryan, Bailey Ober. Like, it works. I think Minnesota, out of any team in this division, I think plays in the most launch pad type of conditions. Um, but like, I definitely don't hate this rotation. Woods Richardson, we could see a step forward. Um, making dividends from the Jose Barrios trade. And Chris Paddock's a major league starting pitcher at this point in his career. Like, it's pretty solid. I definitely don't hate any of it. Um, Going forward to the bullpen, uh, Yohan Duran, Griffin Jacks, Cole Sands, Brock Stewart, Jorge Alcala, there we go, Michael Tonkin, and Cody Funderburk. Funderburk. Jesus, they got all of them. And then Esteban Castellano is also in this bullpen. Funderburk, there we go, is their only lefty in this bullpen. How do we feel about this bullpen, Finn?
I like it. I would have liked to see them have a better number one lefty.
Yeah, I would agree as well. I like Duran in the back of this bullpen. I think he's about as good as you're going to do at the relief spot in Major League Baseball. I think that's great. I think Griffin Jacks is a guy who, I don't know, some team is probably going to pay him to be a starting pitcher by the time he hits free agency. Like, I think there is some potential with Griffin Jackson. He's done a really good job development wise. I think the Twins have been a pretty good pitching development team the past couple of years. Some good stuff. If we want to get to some depth with them, I think we'll start with pitching depth because I think it's what's more interesting for them. David Festa, Zebby Matthews, Louis Varland, Matt Canatero, like, these are a ton of guys who I think are interesting, like, rotation options for them, and they just, they're not currently in the rotation. Which is why when I saw that they were going to shed payroll this offseason, I thought Chris Paddock was certainly gone since he's making $10 million, but it just hasn't happened yet. Justin Tapa and then Ronnie Henriquez are interesting relief arms who have some pretty interesting stuff. I mean, that's their depth. Real quickly, do you have anything on any of those guys, Finn?
I don't.
All right, so uh, we'll transition to their hitting depth. Specifically with them, Manuel Rodriguez, one of their top prospects, Luke Keyshaw, both in AAA. I think both could be pretty awesome early on. Armando Alvarez is a minor league free agent they signed. He could be an interesting right-handed infield option. Um, those are some guys who could play. Um, Walker Jenkins is the top. I think will be the next top prospect in baseball. Potentially, he's 20 years old, got up to Double A. He really rakes. He like, Christian Yelich um, he's going to be awesome, and watch out for him. So yeah, that's just some of their position players as well. Finn, this is a team that's done very little this offseason. We're done with them basically already. What would we grade this offseason? Do we think they got better? I think we both have pretty easy answers to this one.
No.
I would have to agree with no as well. I mean, what do we grade it as well? I would like to hear that.
I'm going to give it a D.
I would also grade it a D on the merits. They didn't do anything stupid, but like they didn't make the team better. They didn't trade Pablo Lopez for what would have been a pretty good return. Carlos Correa is still here. Like at least shift something up if you're not gonna like really make moves to make the team better. And yeah, they just haven't done that. Hasn't necessarily been a good offseason. I don't think we're gonna project them to be very good this season. So um, yeah, I mean, do you have anything else on Minnesota before we transition to Chicago?
No.
All right, so we're going to take a break here and transition to the Chicago White Sox, and that'll be the final team of the Central, and we'll make our division winner picks. We'll see which one of the if either of us will get this one right.
The White Sox are a team that's probably going to finish dead last in this division, but their offseason will probably not have the worst grade in this division.
Yeah, 100%. For the viewers, let's read off their acquisitions. What do we have, Finn?
We have James Karinchak, Omar Narvaez, Merton Perez, and Bobby Dalbec. Now for notable non-tenders. Gavin Sheets and Nicky Lopez.
Yeah. And then trade wise, I believe it'll be scrolled down just a little bit for you. They've done a couple things trade wise. I'm sure the fans know about them. Specifically, I think you are very high on the Crochet deal. For the people who don't know who are living under a rock, what was the Crochet deal of?
They gave Crochet to the White Sox for Kyle Teal, Chase Medroth, Braden Montgomery, and a starting pitcher who's not on my sheet.
The starting pitchers are Wilkman Gonzalez. For those who don't know, Chase Meidroff will probably start at second base for the White Sox this season. Um, Kyle Teal and Braden Montgomery are not the top White Sox prospects because it's a pretty strong farm system, but I mean, Kyle Teal's one of the better catching prospects in baseball, and Braden Montgomery's a top 60 prospect in baseball. He's a really fun, toolsy outfielder who, I'm very interested in what he's going to be. I think it's a great return for Garrett Crochet. I mean, we both have graded it before. Great return. Is that all they did trade wise, Finn?
That is all I did trade wise. It is of note.
Okay, so are you ready to shift forward to their lineup, or do you have any other moves that they've made that you just want to talk about a little bit more?
I'm ready to shift to their lineup.
All right, let's do that then. What do we got lineup wise, Finn?
Mike Talkman, Luis Rivera, Andrew Benintendi, Andrew Vaughn, Josh Rojas, Lennon Sosa, Miguel Vargas, Brooks Baldwin, and Corey Lee are the starters.
Yeah, and like I think the holes in this lineup are pretty obvious. Like, sure, the outfield is a relative strength, but I don't think the outfield situation's any good. I mean, oh my God. And then benches, Nick Maton, Mike Tice, Oscar Colas, Austin Slater. I don't think the bench has really much else to be excited about. It's still a really bad team. And like Finn, Brooks Baldwin's their starting shortstop. Like, this is, this is just not a very good team. I'll let you get the floor on their lineup for a second. What do you feel about this lineup?
Honestly, this lineup is bad. It's expected to be bad, and I don't expect Luis Rivera to be here very much longer.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. Just transition. Do you have anything else on them, or are you ready for rotation?
Honestly, with the lineup, there are a couple of kind of not disgraced, but guys who are just not panning out, like Andrew Vaughn and Josh Rojas, that I could see having a pretty good half of a season and getting traded.
100%. I could see those guys really tapping into something, and Miguel Vargas is too. I mean, he was a very fun prospect at his Dodger days, and ended up being the main piece in the Michael Kopech deal. So, um,
Time to go to the pitching, where I have another guy who could be traded if he does well. And their one, Martin Perez. Their two is Jonathan Gannon. Their three is Davis Martin. Their four is Sean Burke. And their five is Bryce Wilson. Pitching, yeah, same thing. They're bad. They're gonna be bad.
100% Finn. And honestly, like, where's the upgrades on this roster from a year ago? I have no idea. Like, Sean Burke, Bryce Wilson, Davis Martin, Jonathan Cannon. Like, this is our top three. This is our top four until we add Martin Perez. Like, it's crazy that a team in the big leagues looks like this. Um, I'll let you talk about the bullpen, or I want to mention one guy. Shane Smith was the first pick in the Rule 5 draft. He's in their bullpen. I think he could start some games for them at some point. I'll let you go over the rest of their bullpen here.
Rest of their bullpen is Justin Anderson, Fraser Ellard, Freelander Baroa, Gus Varland, Steven Wilson, Cam Boozer, and Jared Schuster.
Yeah, and like we've gone over this roster, and I think you can see why this team is currently sporting a payroll of $53 million. Like you can tell based on the talent on the roster. Uh, do you see any strengths in this bullpen? Like Justin Anderson is a guy who like he could maybe have a solid little season. Like I wouldn't bet on any of these guys to have great seasons, and it's tough to say that about an entire team of players, but that's how it is with this White Sox team. Uh,
Honestly,
with
I wouldn't bet on any of them either.
Yeah, 100%. I'll go over just briefly if there's any like minor guys that stick out, like Edgar Cuero and Kyle Tierl. I would be surprised if they don't debut this season. Um, you mentioned Dahlbeck and the free agency part of it. He could be something for them. Chase Mydroth, I mentioned before, I would expect to eventually start some games at second base for them. Brian Ramos, a fun-ish prospect for them. You know, third base, first base type guy. It could be something. Colson Montgomery is a guy who's consistently been a top prospect for them. His debut is any day now. Jacob Amaya, whatever. They claimed him on waivers. Uh, Outfield wise, Dom Fletcher's still there. Wilfred Veras, is somebody, but nothing too crazy. Samuel Zavala, A-plus guy. He's not even 21 years old. He was a part of the C Steel. Brady Montgomery, like I mentioned before, interesting. And then like George Wolkow, um, crazy power. I think he probably has close to like a 70 raw power, but he's an A-plus guy who's 19 years old. Like he's very far away. And then pitching wise, they have some stuff like Nick Yashrimi, Jairo Arte, I think could make cases to be major league relievers like really soon. Walkman Gonzalez, I think like could make the case for him to be a major league reliever very soon. He could also start games for them. Kai Bush could maybe start games for them. Justin Dunn, used to be prospect. He could start games for them. And like their top prospects are Higgins Smith and Noah Schultz, who like they're awesome. They're not gonna debut at the start of the season in the big leagues, but they could definitely pitch some games for them. And then Drew Thorpe was the main piece of the Dylan Cease trade. He's also in AAA. Like there's a ton of guys on the fringe here that I think could be kind of fun with Chicago, but nothing that is super needle moving. So do we think Chicago got any better?
I do. Future wise, anyway.
So do you think they got better for this next coming season compared to last year?
No, I think they got worse.
I would 100% agree. I think they got worse. I think they did a really good job in the Crochet deal. Like that's awesome. Maybe they get good at developing players. We'll see if they do. Um, I would say that they've done pretty good this offseason. I would give it a B. Trading Crochet and getting a good return, I think, is really good, and I think it's a good step in the right direction. Hope that they run a payroll above $55 million next season, but yeah, that's currently where they stand. The biggest contract in team history is Andrew Benintendi. So, what else is there to ask of them?
Honestly, I agree with that grade. They did get about as good of a return as you can expect for Derek Crochet.
100% Finn. I guess this transitions us to predictions now with this division. Interesting division. If you had to pick a team right now, who's winning this division?
Cleveland.
Okay. So for me, I feel a mix between the Royals and Cleveland. Um, I think the Royals have somehow a stronger starting pitching rotation, even though I think Cleveland has a little more depth in that area. And there is still some upside with Cleveland, but I just really like the upside of Reagans, Lugo, and Waka. Like I do like that. And then, I think Kansas City could win the division, but I still think it's Cleveland. Um, but they did have some important losses bat wise. How did you feel on the next couple teams?
Honestly, I think Kansas City is the clear two.
I would also agree with that. I think I would put Minnesota and Detroit in like a section by themselves where like I expect this to be an 80-win team, but how much more than that is how I feel about those guys. Um, but I really do like Kansas City and Cleveland to like be really good teams next year. And I think in Kansas City's case, like they could honestly really push for a division here. Um, so I guess we're stamping our final predictions, Finn. Are we both stamping Cleveland? Is that the question?
Yes.
Okay. I'm gonna I'm gonna stamp Cleveland. I don't think Kansas City did. If they upgrade in the corner outfield, I could stamp them to win the division. But they just haven't done that. So I'm gonna stay with Cleveland to win the division again. Do you have anything else before we wrap this one up, Finn?
I don't.
All right. So that'll do it for this episode. This is the AL Central, episode. Next week's episode will be, um, damn it, I sent it to you 2 weeks ago, but fucking Luca decided to get traded. Edit that out.
I believe you said the rest of your list.
I did. I got it now. All right, so that'll do it for this one. Next week's episode will be the top 50 list that I have. It's the rest of my top 100 list. That'll be out next week. There should be a shorter video coming out earlier in the week for the podcast episode coming out on Thursday. This episode will be coming out on a Tuesday. It's a little out of order, but there's a video Sheldon and I are doing on Thursday. So y'all look forward to that video and the normal Saturday podcast for the NBA as my phone falls. We'll see you guys then.